Women pick up on this immediately. It's not something you have to announce. It's just there in how you hold yourself, how you listen, how you respond when things don't go your way. There's a steadiness to it that feels rare because it is rare. Most people are reactive, anxious, performing. A man who isn't doing any of that stands out without trying. This isn't about age alone. Plenty of older men never develop this quality, and some younger men figure it out early. But generally speaking, maturity, real maturity, not just years lived, creates a kind of magnetism that doesn't rely on flash or performance. The language these men use reflects this internal state. They don't talk fast. They don't fill every silence. They don't need to dominate conversations. When they speak, it's measured and intentional. That verbal restraint signals confidence in a way that talking more never could. The word we does something subtle in conversation that most people don't think about consciously, but they absolutely feel it. When someone shifts from talking about themselves to talking about shared experience, it creates a frame. It suggests togetherness without demanding it. It invites without pressuring. Think about how different these sound. I'm going to grab coffee after this versus we should grab coffee after this. The first one is just information. The second one is an invitation that assumes connection, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that feels natural and easy. Mature men do this instinctively because they've stopped thinking purely in terms of what they want and started thinking in terms of how experiences are shared. That's a fundamental shift in perspective that only comes with emotional growth. Younger men are often so focused on themselves, their goals, their image, their next move, that everything stays in I language. When a man uses we appropriately, it signals that he's capable of thinking beyond himself. He's not just trying to get something from you. He's imagining what it would be like to do something together. That future-oriented, partnership-minded thinking is attractive because it shows he's emotionally available in a real way. The key is that it has to be genuine. You can't force we into every sentence and expect it to land. It works when it reflects an actual internal orientation toward connection. When a man has moved past the stage of needing to prove himself and into the stage of actually enjoying people, we start showing up naturally in his speech. Women respond to this because it makes them feel included rather than pursued. There's no pressure in it, just an easy assumption that you might enjoy something together. That lightness, that lack of heaviness, is part of what makes it work. What makes this attractive is simple. It creates space for the other person. When you're not performing or managing your image, the person you're with gets to relax too. That permission to just be without pressure is something people crave and rarely find. The difference between like and appreciate seems small on the surface, but it reveals something significant about how someone processes the world. Like is immediate. It's a gut reaction. You see something, you feel good about it, you say you like it. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's surface level by nature. Appreciate requires a different mental process. It means you've taken time to recognize value. You've thought about something beyond your initial reaction. You've noticed qualities that maybe aren't immediately obvious to everyone else. That extra layer of perception is what separates the two words. When a man tells a woman he appreciates something about her, it doesn't feel like standard flattery. It feels like he actually paid attention, like he saw something real and took the time to value it. That kind of recognition hits differently than being told you're pretty or nice or fun. Those compliments are fine, but they're generic. Appreciate is specific, even when the thing being appreciated isn't spelled out in detail. There's also something about the word itself that feels mature. Kids say they like things. Adults who've developed some depth appreciate them. It signals that you've lived enough to know the difference between novelty and substance, between what's flashy and what's actually valuable. Women pick up on this distinction even if they never consciously think about it. When someone appreciates you, it implies they see your actual qualities, not just the surface presentation. That makes you feel known in a way that surface-level compliments never do. The men who naturally use this word aren't doing it strategically. They've just developed the capacity to see beyond the obvious. They notice effort, thoughtfulness, character. And when they express that recognition, it comes out as appreciation rather than just liking something. That shift in language is a direct reflection of depth. The way someone speaks when things get tense tells you almost everything you need to know about their emotional maturity. Younger men, or men who haven't done the internal work, tend to get reactive. Their language becomes defensive, sharp, or overly explanatory. You can hear the emotion driving the words before the thought has even fully formed. Mature men speak differently in those same moments. Their tone stays level. Their words are measured. They don't raise their voice to make a point. They don't interrupt or talk over people. Even when they disagree, there's a calm underneath it that signals they're not being controlled by the emotion they're feeling. This isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending everything's fine. It's about having enough self-awareness to pause before reacting, to feel something fully and then choose how to respond rather than just letting it spill out unfiltered. Women are incredibly attuned to this quality because emotional regulation is directly tied to safety. If a man can't manage his own emotions in small moments, a disagreement about dinner plans, a miscommunication, a stressful situation, what happens when real conflict shows up? That question sits in the back of people's minds even if they never say it out loud. When a man's language stays calm and clear even under pressure, it communicates stability. It says this person isn't going to spiral. He's not going to make everything about his ego. He can handle discomfort without falling apart or lashing out. This shows up in word choice too. Mature men tend to use language that's less absolute and more nuanced. Instead of you always or you never, they say I noticed or it felt like. That shift from accusation to observation is a hallmark of someone who's learned to regulate their emotions and communicate from a grounded place. There's a huge difference between vague compliments and specific observations. Most people default to the vague stuff because it's easy and it feels safe. You're so nice. You look great. That was fun. These aren't bad things to say, but they're also completely forgettable because they could apply to anyone. Mature men have learned to be specific. Instead of, you're smart, they say, I appreciate how you thought through that problem from multiple angles. Instead of, you're beautiful, they say, the way you lit up when you were talking about that project, that was striking. The difference is night and day. Specificity does something psychologically that generic praise never can. It proves you were actually paying attention. Anyone can throw out a surface-level compliment. It takes real presence to notice something specific about how someone thinks, how they move through the world, what makes them unique. When someone gives you a specific compliment, you can feel that they actually saw you. Not just the version of you that everyone sees, but something deeper. Maybe it's how you handled a tough conversation. Maybe it's a small gesture you made that most people wouldn't have noticed. Whatever it is, the specificity makes it real. This is also why generic pickup lines or scripted flattery fall flat with most women who have any experience. They've heard it all before. They know when someone's running a script versus when someone's actually engaged with who they are as a person. Men who use specific language aren't doing it as a technique. They're doing it because they genuinely find people interesting and they've trained themselves to notice details. That curiosity shows up in how they talk. They remember things you said 3 conversations ago. They ask follow-up questions that show they were listening. Their words reflect real attention, and real attention is rare enough to be magnetic. There's a tendency, especially when people are nervous or trying to impress someone, to fill every silence with words. They over-explain. They justify things that don't need justification. They keep talking long after the point has been made, just to avoid the discomfort of a pause. Mature men have learned to be comfortable with saying less. They make their point and then stop. They don't feel the need to fill every gap in conversation. They're okay with silence, which is a level of comfort that only comes from genuine confidence. When someone can say something in 5 words instead of 50, it signals that they're not anxious about how they're being perceived. They trust that what they said was enough. They don't need to convince you or win you over with volume. That restraint reads as self-assurance. Think about how different these feel. A younger guy might say, yeah, I was thinking maybe we could go to that place. I mean, if you want to, no pressure, but I heard it's good and I thought it might be fun. But we could also do something else if you prefer. An older guy says, let's try that new place on 5th. Same invitation, completely different energy. The brevity isn't about being cold or distant. It's about trusting your own judgment enough to not constantly hedge or apologize for having preferences. When you speak with that kind of directness, people respect it. There's clarity in it that feels refreshing compared to all the verbal gymnastics most people do. Women especially notice this because they're used to men either being overly aggressive or overly apologetic in how they communicate. A man who can be direct without being pushy, clear without being demanding, that's a rare balance. And it all comes through in how economically he uses language. This is the part that ties everything together. You can try to adopt certain words or phrases because you think they'll make you more attractive. But if those words don't match who you actually are, people feel the disconnect. It comes across as performed, and performance always has a shelf life. The language that mature men use isn't something they learned from a script. It's a natural byproduct of how they've chosen to live. A man who genuinely values partnership thinks in terms of we without forcing it. A man who's developed depth naturally appreciates things rather than just liking them. A man who's done the work on emotional regulation speaks calmly even when things get tense. The words are evidence of the internal work, not a replacement for it. This is why you can't shortcut this process. You can memorize phrases, you can practice certain language patterns, but if the person underneath those words hasn't actually changed, it won't land. Women have heard every line, every technique, every strategy. What they haven't heard much of is authentic communication from men who've actually become someone worth knowing. The real question isn't, what should I say to be more attractive? The real question is, who am I becoming, and does my language reflect that? When you focus on the second question, the first one answers itself. Men who are genuinely grounded, emotionally mature, and capable of real connection don't have to think about what words to use. Those words just come out naturally because they match the internal reality. That alignment between who someone is and how they speak, that's what people respond to. So if you're hearing this and thinking about changing your language, good, but don't stop there. Change the life that produces the language. Build the values that make those words true. That's where the real transformation happens. So we've talked about two words, we and appreciate, and what they reveal about the men who use them naturally. But if you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed this was never really about memorizing vocabulary. It was about understanding what those words signal: maturity, depth, emotional regulation, the ability to see people for who they actually are and value them accordingly. Those are the qualities that create real attraction, especially as people get older and start caring less about flash and more about substance. The language is just the evidence. It's what comes out when a man has done the internal work to become someone grounded, present, and capable of genuine connection. You can't fake that for long. People feel the difference between someone performing maturity and someone who's actually lived it. So if you're taking something practical from this, let it be a reminder to focus on who you're becoming, not just what you're saying. Are you developing emotional maturity? Are you learning to think in terms of partnership instead of just personal gain? Are you capable of seeing depth in others and appreciating it when you find it? When you work on those things, your language shifts naturally. You stop sounding like everyone else. You stop saying things because you think they'll work and start saying things because they're true. And that authenticity, that alignment between who you are and how you speak, is what people recognize and respond to. The two words we talked about today aren't magic. They're markers, signs that point to something deeper. Work on the deeper thing. Everything else follows. Thanks for watching. If this landed for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.